G'day guys, welcome back to SuperCoach or DR and welcome to the round 17 stock market video. Hope that you're all going well. I'll tell you what, there's a fair bit of news going around in the AFL at the moment, isn't there? Probably the biggest story of the week is the fact that David Noble and the Kangaroos have mutually decided to part ways. A pretty sad state of affairs there because I'm a huge David Noble fan. Has done wonders for the Brisbane Lions, so I wish him all the best luck in his next journey, and I'm pretty sure that he'll find himself back in clubland pretty soon. SuperCoach wise, probably the biggest news was the fact that CLARRY has a fractured thumb. I'm pretty sure that he'll be missing this week. There's a slight chance that the big fella does get up, but I'd be planning for him missing this week. I know there's not many other coaches in this position. I think there's only 6% of us that own the big Nank, but he's also most likely going to be missing this week. I don't think it's going to be anything long term, but still, that could be a bit of an issue for some. We've got Jace Burgoyne right up the top of the list this week. I think if you're looking to bring in a rookie, he's someone to take a pretty close look at. Roses all the way down the bottom, scored a bloody -8 for me this week. That wasn't fantastic. And we also have the ex-GOAT, Patrick Dangerfield, looking pretty cherry ripe at the moment and could be a bit of a pod selection if you don't have a lot of cash in the wallet at the moment. Before I get into it, also don't want to forget to give a big shout out to the blokes from SuperCoach Edge, Damon and Liam, invited me onto the podcast this week. Had a great chat with them, had an absolute ball, full of laughs, full of banter, and also some great information. So shout out to you two legends. Make sure you give them a follow. Couple of really decent blokes. And look, apart from that, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, Brent, if you're watching, I've lost my phone, bloke. So if you're trying to contact me, you won't be able to. So call Lisa, mate, and I'll get back to you there. So apart from that, guys, all the best luck for this week. You know where we start, the 500k plus defenders. At the top of the list this week, we have Jordan Dawson. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, non-owners got some slight relief. Finn McGuinness was sent to shut down Dawson, who has been one of the hottest players in the comp and did his job really well. Restricted him to only the 15 touches, which resulted in an 80, which was his lowest score in ages. But how did he even get to an 80? He did lay the 10 tackles, which was really impressive. Good to see that even though he wasn't finding much of the ball, he was piling on the defensive pressure. Hopefully other teams don't look to lock down on him so hard and he can continue on his merry way. The next man, Shannon Hearn, this snuck up on me a little bit, but in his last 7 matches, his lowest score has been a 99. He did miss rounds 9 to 11 due to injury, but I'll read out his consecutive scores from his last 7. 100, 129, 111, 109, the 99s I just mentioned, 116, and a 130 last week. We do have to give the old fella a little bit of credit here. The risk is obviously age and durability, but the basic rule is when he's on the park, he scores well. Witho isn't there to steal any of his chips, and last week he managed to amass 27 kicks. We know what his strength is, and that's his big right foot. You'd be a brave man or woman to select him over some of the other options that we've got available, but if you're looking for a risk versus reward pod, then Hearn could be the man that you're after. The Seagull, the ex-king of the chips, isn't in bad form. 148, 89, and a 106 in his last 3. 27 touches and 4 tackles was a decent return on the weekend. I thought the Lizard looked more exciting, but Lloyd found more of the ball, was pretty calm and composed with his disposal, unlike the Lizard, who almost looked like a bit of a video game character glitching to me. But I think the Seagull now becomes more of a realistic option for me. He is regaining some trust. And look, as the numbers currently sit, he does have the highest 3-round average on the list, mainly due to that monster a couple of weeks back. But if you think he's back, you can go for it. But I've still got some reservations. I don't think he's near top 6, but he could finish the year as a top, say, 10 to 12 type if things continue to click and he can maintain some consistency. Sinclair, nice 110 from him, continued his strong form from the week before, with his 79 against Sydney about to drop out of his price cycle, his break-evens all the way down to 77 again. It's pretty simple here. If teams look to lock down on him, he's got the potential to pop out a 70 to an 80, but if he's allowed to roam free, then he'll most likely score between, say, a 110 to 150. Still a great selection, in my opinion. Dacos now sits with some of the finest defensive company in the comp. I said last week, if I own Dacos in short, I'd actually prefer Dacos on field. And I tell you what, if you're in a position where you had 3 trades and Dacos as your D6, at a stretch in M8, I'd actually avoid upgrading him and just keep those trades in the bank. He's such an elite talent, had 21 disposals but used the ball extremely well, 90% efficiency, kicked a typical Dacos type goal from the boundary. Tell you what, that got the crowd out of their seat. I was out of my seat as well, but I don't think I've seen a first year player in a long time who's so composed and confident at the level. Future superstar, this bloke. Now, Bailey Dale, I'll say it again, a week is a long time in footy. After posting a lovely 134 last week, which was his highest of the year, he backed that up with his lowest score of the year with a 76. Horse obviously came in with a game plan, and that was to shut down their run-off half-back, restrict their offensive drive out defence. So Clark, who's done a couple of nice tagging type roles before, he was sent to Dale and absolutely blanketed him. Apart from the kick-ins, he was restricted to only 6 disposals for the night. He would have gone close to doing that in the first quarter, I reckon, last week. Look, on a positive note, this is an absolute floor game from Dale, and if this is as low as he goes, it's not an absolute disaster, is it? Still a great pick, I think, Dale. And Sicily, just a 92 points on the weekend, 21 kicks, couple of handballs, as well as 13 marks, so which was a game high. Unfortunately, though, his Muppet count was also close to a game high with 7, which is always going to affect his scoring in a negative way. But again, I'm not too concerned, still a very happy owner. Georgie Hewitt, great to see a decent score from him on the weekend. He'd been around that 100 mark for the last month, but he grabbed 26 touches, close to half contested, laid 5 tackles, and had 8 clearances, 123 points through his efforts. One of the recruits of the year, and definitely one of my best starting picks. Himmelberg, now available as defender after being awarded DPP in the last round of changes, seems to have really enjoyed his time down back. In the back of our minds, there's always that slight risk or concern that he goes back forward. The coaches have said it's a possibility, but personally, I think it's close to a troll now, and in current form, I just don't see any reason to change things up, unless injury strikes in-game, for example. Seems like a decent option, but zero value at the moment. The time to jump on was definitely over a month ago, I think, with this pick. Sardi's first failure in a farewell, 13 touches for 64 points. Just couldn't manage to make much of an impact this week, but I think owners can forgive him for one down game. Doc was back with a bang, and unlike Sard, did have a big impact. We love seeing a 20-plus kick count from him. He gained over 600 metres on the night, also went at 85% efficiency, which was nice. Laid the 4 tackles, got a couple of clearances, and that was a nice little bonus. Pretty handy there for Doc. Houston, last 4 scores, 76, 131, 62, and a 104, so a little bit all over the shop here. Has actually been a half-decent pick this year, though. Gush Brayshaw, on a pretty down night for Melbourne, this bloke can hold his head high. Another solid performance, 102 points for his 27 touches. Been good this year and seems to be a pretty reliable pod. And Baker, his lowest score for a farewell with a 70, 19 touches, but just not his week. On to the defenders, 250 to 500k, and we've got Dan Rioli up the top this week, followed up his 127 with a 129, close to best on ground in the first half, 19 touches, 6 score involvements to half-time, 84 points through his efforts, ended up with 29 touches and 4 tackles, so a slower second half, but still a really solid game from him. You'll be paying over 500k for him next week. Tommy Atkins, pod alert here. I was really close to including him last week, but I did hold off. He returned to his favourite role as a tough inside midfielder. He played a ripper, particularly in the second half. Really loved his pressure, tackled well, and had an equal team-high 9 clearances. It'd take a brave man or woman, as I mentioned before, to trade him in, but I do see a world where this could work out if he continues to play through the midfield. A very risky one, though. Pendles, he was looking really good early on the season, then really slowed up to the point where people were pretty desperate to trade him out. Finding some form again. Collingwood are in great form, but his floor has lowered this season. Jordan Clark and Nick Hine, they're 2 pods that deserve some recognition for their recent efforts, but there's just no value, so they become pretty much irrelevant, you'd think, but options nonetheless. Ridley played a decent game against my boys, but this is the issue. His last 4 scores read 64, 100, 80, and a 103. The consistency simply isn't there. Bit of a poor man Sicily in 2022. Steve May flagged him last week as a bloke to bring in if the wallet was empty, and he delivered a really nice score for his price. 26 disposals, 735 metres gained, and 24 of those 26 disposals were kicks. So that's what you call a nice kick to handball ratio. Again, I think he's a good buy for the price this week if you're low on cash. Shorty, 4 kicks at 25% efficiency in the first. somehow ended on 12 points for that quarter. Received a very lucky free kick in the second, then a 50-metre penalty on top to gift him a goal assist from point-blank range. In the next ruck contest, received another 3, another inside 50 goal assist to Bolton. So went from 12 points to 36 points in the space of 2 minutes. And by the end of the half, he'd pushed up to 54 points. So really hit back with a 40-plus point second term. But again, his second half was pretty mediocre. Another mid-90s type score from short. I've said it for the last few weeks. I think if you've got the luxury to upgrade someone in your defensive line and you are a short owner and you haven't got any other major problems, I think it's fine to actually move him on. Coming just to 64 points this week. He scored 100 plus and a 45 in the last month, so way too risky for me. A big variance in scores, just too high. I don't think he's got the ceiling to cancel out some of those low floor scores. Whitfield, for the first time in a few weeks, we saw the bad Lockie Whitfield only touch the ball 10 times, which yielded just to 46 points. I don't think it's necessarily panic stations, as he's had a fantastic last month, but something seemed off. Not sure if he's carrying a little bit of an injury, but yeah, not sure on this one. Just didn't look right to me. Jack Crisp, another soggy game, and now a bit of a concern for me. Just not delivering. Started in the midfield in the second half, then moved back for times in the second half. Look, 20 touches, around half of those were effective. I'm obviously holding, but season average of 105 is starting to slip from his grasp. And Luke Ryan with a 3-round average of 75, just not worth it in my opinion. On to the defenders under 250k, and a big thank you again to all of the channel members. You can see some of those legends down here. We've now raised over $200 for Beyond Blue. It's not the biggest amount of money that you've ever heard of, but every dollar does count, and it's going to a really good cause. So thank you very much for that, guys. Much appreciated. But the man at the top of the list this week, Jace Burgoyne, looks like the pick of the Bubble Boys to me. Only the 12 touches, 3 marks and a tackle, but looked composed, used the ball well. He actually went over 90% efficiency, so basically didn't waste a disposal. And if you select him in your midfield, you open up a pretty handy defensive mid-swing. And with the likes of Dawson, Sinclair, Cripps, Short, Hewitt, the list goes on. They all share that DPP link. It could become really useful for you when injury strikes or when you need cover. I couldn't tell you what his job security is like moving forward, but with a lot of the rookies selected later in the season, it's always a bit of a gamble. So if you're looking for a downgrade this week, he seems like a decent choice if started in the 22. Carl Brown started forward and then was pushed back after Davis was injured. Could only manage 4 kicks at 50% efficiency and a couple of tackles for the day, which resulted in a score of 26. So a big letdown after his performance last week. Not sure if he's going to hold his spot or not. Blunky played in defence, had the job on Fogarty for most of the day, managed to get 12 touches, half of those contested, went at an impressive 91% efficiency, so 63 points was a pretty good return. And Massimo copped a corky, spent some time off the ground, came back on, went back off. Fingers crossed his name this week, but we'll have to wait to see until team sheets come out. On to the midfielders, 500k plus, and as we know, Mr. Clayton Oliver, a lot of news surrounding him this week. I'll tell you what, it was an interesting game from the number one scorer in SuperCoach. Was only on around 13 points at quarter time, and then really got into gear in the second, and was on 77 points by half time. This is what the bad man can do. Then a bit of a quiet third, and then, as we know, Selwood threw a boot and collected Oliver's hand. Right away, we could tell he was in distress. But in classic pig form, played out the game, was attempting one-handed tackles, but he clearly wasn't right. News has since come out of the club that he has a fractured thumb and is likely to miss this week. There is a slight chance that he still plays. He's a bloody tough unit, but I would be planning for his absence. I doubt whether it would be more than 1 week. I think Oliver has a 9-10 day break, which would be great. Your guess is as good as mine if he gets up. But as I mentioned before, I'd be planning for him to miss. Would I trade him out? Absolutely not. If you've got a ridiculous amount of trades, you can trade him out and trade him straight back in, then go for it. But if not, I think he's an absolute hold. Laird continues to kill it every week. Pretty much a must-have. One of the best scorers in the game. Not much discussion needed with this pick. Just get him if you can. And if you are hell-bent on trading out Oliver, then Laird should be a number one target. Zeret, he's gone from 0 to hero in my book, smashed it out of the park against Lions, and did everything pretty much apart from hit the scoreboard. Over 30 touches last week, and it was a really nice surprise as an owner, and all of a sudden there is hope. Has the third highest 3-round average, and the second lowest break even. So someone to consider, but I'd probably prefer someone like a Jack Steele. Remember, he has gone an 80 and 90 in the last month, but great to see him hit some red hot form. Miller, nice start to the game with a 33-point first quarter and pretty much just continued on from there with a great four-quarter performance. He's been a little bit up and down, but really starting to hit form, 130 plus on the weekend. But I'm slightly concerned that he may cop a Caldwell tag this week, so maybe slightly risky as a captain option. Track fell from the great heights of last week with a sub-100, although he did kick a couple of nice long-range goals. His ball use was terrible, 21 touches, only the 6 contested at 53% efficiency. It simply isn't good enough. With Piggy out, most likely out this week, I expect Drew to be sent to track, which would be a mini disaster for owners. Just my guess, but I think it could be on the cards. Cam Guthrie continued on with his solid form. He's been featured as a decent pod last month, and if you jumped on earlier, you would have got yourself a nice little bargain here. 28 touches with 14 contested, 2 goals. That was a pretty good return. If it wasn't for his match-high 9 clangers, this score of 119 could have been much higher. LDU, we couldn't, could we? I certainly couldn't do it, but he's by far the biggest pod on this list, and in better current form than some of the other big names, I suppose. Brayshaw, talk about being in ripping form, really cementing himself as a star of the comp, favourite for the Brownlow, I'm pretty sure, and even though champion data don't always rate his game, he's been scoring well. 36 touches, 10 tackles and a goal for 132 points and a best on-ground performance on the weekend, but did rack up 8 Muppets, which hurts. Kelly actually has a new symbol this week. He's just trucking along, nothing fancy, but nothing disastrous. And Sam Walsh, really disappointing with only an 88 on the weekend, especially against the Eagles. Been a little bit up and down, and all of a sudden, Merritt almost looks like a more solid pick, but personally, I'd still be backing Walshy in. Benny Keys, as you can see, we got the new symbol this week. A big shout out to AFL Doodles for designing this. Make sure that you give him a follow on Twitter. It's a super account, but I absolutely love that. Benny the Key. Lockie Neal was well beaten by Caldwell over the weekend, capping the Lions on the day, but seems like energy. He wasn't receiving a heck of a lot of assistance from his teammates. Many of us had him as captain, particularly after his mammoth score against the Dons earlier this year, but that was a fail this week, and the coaches that passed on Oliver's VC score for Neal were punished for not playing it safe. Jack Steele, still at a really attractive price for his potential output, had a great first half in particular with 17 touches for the 70 points, only added the 11 disposals after half-time and ended up on 109 points through his efforts, laid 7 tackles, 4 clearances, and as we know, when he's up and about, one of the best players in the comp. Jack McRae, you'll see a new symbol next to his name this week. There's just a bit of a lack of trust at the moment, and this was a really weird one on the weekend. Aside from the subs, he had the second lowest time on ground for the Dogs at only 73%. Bonton-Libba had 84%, Dunkley 85%, but Jack was left at the back of the pack, only the 26 disposals, and I say only because this bloke can get 30 to 40 in his sleep. But as I mentioned, he is getting hard to trust for a decent score, which is so un-Jack McRae-like, but in current form, he simply isn't a viable captaincy option for now, and that really hurts. Callum Mills, after a pair of 80s, the contested beast was back. The Sydney boys would have received a fair spray after last week's efforts, and Mills responded in fine fashion, laid a lazy 7 tackles in the first quarter alone, and really led the way for his side. Only the 23 touches and 9 contested, but laid 16 tackles for the game, which was huge, and also kicked a goal in red time. Has the potential to be a very scary player not to own. And to be honest, none of Cripps, Boak, Wines really interest me. They're the type of picks I'd be getting out of if you've got the luxury. None of them fill me with great confidence moving forward, and it's more of a matter of hoping they come good rather than expecting it. On to the midfielders, 250 to 500k. The first thing you'll probably notice here is that I do have the empty wallet symbol as well as the umbrella symbol. So the empty wallet obviously refers to the fact that you're only going here if you're desperate for cash and if you can't go up to one of those elite type options. And the umbrella is cover. So I think these guys would be really nice cover if you're in a position to do so. But we do have Chatty Warner up the top, 108 from the young man in a really good performance again last week. Didn't quite back up his 150 from the week before, but that's obviously a huge ask. I really love this guy as a player. Love the way he bursts out of the stoppage, kicks those long bombs. After 25 touches and 3 goals last week, he went 25 and 2 goals too this week. So a goal-kicking midfielder with a really bright future. Lock him in 2024, or even as soon as next year if he continues this form. Titch, couple of 100+ scores in a trot, but doesn't really interest me. Hasn't all year. Really, his defensive pressure is right on. Been a tackling machine lately. His tackle count in the last 5 weeks got 11, 11, 10, 5, and 11. That's elite. And I wish he found this form earlier in the year, but great to see that the young gun is just out there playing the game he loves. If he's still your M8, I think he is an upgrade if you can, but not the worst situation in the world if you do have to hold. Now, this man does actually interest me a little bit, not in my personal situation, but if you're looking at all the blokes on this list, then Danger is the guy who I think can have the best end to the season. Featured on the stock market for the first time in a long time last week, and he rewarded the faith with 114, 31 touches, 14 contested, 9 clearances. That was a fantastic return, and it seems like the Geelong medical staff have actually managed him really well. Look pretty cherry ripe, starting the midfield, then rotating up forward. And this score could have easily been a 130+, but like many players this weekend, really butchered the ball, only went at 58% efficiency. If you're strapped for cash, you have to at least consider him. But at the same time, we've seen what's happened to some of the older players returning from injury this year, and things just haven't worked out. A bit of a risk versus reward. Each their own on this pick, and pretty team dependent, as I mentioned before. If you are keen on trading in as a cover pick, I always prefer a play with DPP if you can, but Danger could be an amazing M9 swing with someone like a Paddy Cripps, I think. Tim Kelly, a bit of a wild card type pick. Hard to predict how he'll go from here. Reality is, though, he's only tummed up 3 in his last 12 games, and that's just not good enough to warrant a position in our sides. And Tom Green, after starting the season like a freight train, the young Green Bull is slowed up, which was sort of expected. Some labelled him a keeper early on, but that was probably a bit of an early crow, and we may have to wait until next year for that to happen, depending on what GWS actually do with their midfield setup. On to the midfielders under 250k. We've got 2 bubble boys this week with True and Ace. Neither option really appeals to me, to be quite honest. Job security seems a little dicey. Look, I suppose with Roses out, that may actually allow Ace to stay in the 22, but we'll have to see on that one. He did kick another goal, which was good. Noah Cumberland, actually delisted in October, then re-rookied. Came on as a sub in the first quarter, replacing Lynch. Played forward, had an immediate impact as well. Bagged a couple of goals in 2 minutes, then got 2 more opportunities in the second, and unfortunately did miss 2 relatively easy shots. Could have had a bag of 4 at halftime, but just wasn't to be. Ended up on 2 goals 3 for 62 points, so looked dangerous, and I think he deserves another opportunity this week. And Jimmy Tunstall had some decent moments last week, played his role, but I think the ship sailed now. Not worth spending over 140k on. Hopefully a player for the future, though. On to the rucks, and at the top we have Maxi Gawn. Last week had a solid first half before fading in the third and really fading in the fourth. Just wasn't clunking marks, wasn't his dominant self. 13 out of his 14 possessions were contested, which did save his score a bit, but similar to Track and other teammates, his efficiency was right down at only 57%. It just won't get the job done. Does play a ruckless Port side this week, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him go 140+. If you held, I think he'll finish out the season really well. And just a quick side note, if Jackson does make his way back to WA next year, for me, Gawn will be an absolute lock and will be the first player selected in my side. Rob, another 100+ from him with a 106. Been a nice pod selection for those who bought him in recently. Now, I do have the caution symbol on him there because it was mentioned by the Crows last week that they're looking to give more ruck time to Thilthorpe. And Rob is actually looking to spend a little bit more time forward than usual. So this certainly isn't a good sign if it does come to fruition. We'll monitor his CBA percentage over the next week or two, but I would be slightly nervous if I was a Rob owner. Shrek, we're still waiting for that big ceiling game. I hope it's coming soon, but nonetheless, still a decent score, the 111 over the weekend. Kicked a couple of snags, which was nice. Brewy won the first quarter, and he's starting to actually look dangerous down the line and when drifting forward. If the Peanut and the Hickey don't manage to get up this weekend, he could have the opportunity to really cash in. I expect him to give Reed, if Reed was a player to come in and play that number 1 ruck role, a much harder time than the English did last week. So I like the Shrek selection, but durability, as we all know, is always going to be a slight risk. Witsy should have been paid a really nice contested intercept mark in the first, but was denied by the umpire. As a non-owner, these are the little wins that you take, but he obviously got the better of Nank. In the first, it was a 20-point to 7-point first quarter. I was just going, come on, Nank, get up, son. But obviously, Nank was injured, and Witch just took advantage of that, really pushed on, scored a 117, only 70% TOG as well, and I'm bringing him back in this week. Rowan Marshall, 93 points in the weekend, finally gifted DPP, but it's a little bit too late now, I think. But I'll tell you what, next year, if Ryder retires, Rowan will be firmly on my preseason radar. And yeah, so let's just say Ryder's gone, Jackson goes from Melbourne, Gawn and Marshall, I think could be a really, really nice combo. I know that some people are actually starting to plan for next year, so definitely put those two on your shortlist anyway. 2 metre Peter, got to give the bloke some respect. With basically our whole defensive unit out last week, we didn't have any answers, and he had a really big day. And he'll also be looking to go big again this week against his old mob. Will he go another 100 plus? Yeah, I'm not too sure, but if you look at that recent form, 102 3-round average, certainly nothing to shy away from. Darcy Cameron, another solid game from him, only the 12 touches at 63%, but was a real offensive threat, kicking 3 majors. The way he's playing in tandem with Cox, I wonder if the Pies would be regretting signing Grundy up to such a long-term multi-million-dollar deal. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens at season's end. Goldie started forward with CCJ in the first centre bounce, which was a slight concern, but he really hit back after his lowest score of the year last week. Pumped out a nice 100 plus, kicking 2 goals too. Got twice as many hitouts as Coleman Jones. He did miss a very gettable set shot, but apart from that, really didn't put a foot wrong. Received a few interesting frees in the ruck against Cox, which did help his cause, but a great response from the veteran would have really pleased owners. Finally, great to see Tim English come back. Many had high hopes for him on his return this week. We saw him go 160 on his comeback after his last little layoff, but unfortunately, he didn't reach great heights. When Peanut went down, we thought, beautiful, here we go. Another slight advantage for Timmy. But then Sam Reid comes in and gave him an absolute lesson. Now, I understand fully that English's strength isn't necessarily in the ruck contest itself, as he scores most of his points around the ground, but at times, he almost looked uncompetitive, very reactive to what the other ruckman was doing. He seemed to focus more on what his opponent was doing, and by the time it was time to actually contest the ruck, he couldn't impact. It was really weird to watch, and it just may have been me, but that's the best way that I can describe it. There were a few times in the middle where he just tapped it forward almost to himself, but couldn't quite get the ball in his follow-up. Things just didn't quite click for him on his return. Did kick a nice set shot in the second, had an almost identical set shot in the last, which he couldn't convert. So I suppose that's the difference between turning up and not. I'm still pretty happy to own him. I think he'll bounce back, and always great ruck cover going forward if you've got him at F1 or F2. Blitzarv playing off a wing, providing a bit of ruck support. He got 81 points. Nick Nat, rumours he may be out this week, just too risky to trade in. Oh, Nank. Mr. Nank. The big fella started off slowly, and I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for a lucky free kick for a push in the back against Wits, we may have seen a duck egg here in the first. Played some big tog with 93% in that first quarter, but it obviously just didn't translate into points. It was on 7 points to finish the quarter, then scaled down to 4 for some reason. Not too sure why. Then in the first centre bounce in the second, had a beautiful hit out to advantage, received the follow-up handball, basically double score in 8 seconds, and then a couple of contests later, gave a free kick away to Wits for a high, and back down we go again. But little did I know that Nank the Tank had actually done himself a boo-boo early and injured his knee. It got to the stage apparently where he just couldn't go on any further, spent the remainder of the game on the Pines. Super unfortunate for the 6% of owners that currently own him. I was speaking with Liam from SuperCoach Edge during the week, and he feels my pain as well, so shout out to you, mate. I'm not sure if you're trading or not, but hopefully the big fella is back soon. And apparently that is a real possibility. He may not even miss a week, but in the words of the Richmond medical staff, he's doubtful for this week. He could only miss the one, but as we know, we're never sure with these things. The question is, do you trade him out? The answer is probably yes for mine, if you can afford to with your current trade situation. The way I look at it is, if he does come back after the 1 week, puts in a bit of a stinker on his return, then his price will be so low that if you decide that you do actually want to move him on, the cupboard will be really bare with players at a similar price point. It'll be, a hope and a prayer type stuff. Selecting one of these players that you really just don't want in your side. You'll be forced into a bad pick, I think. So, in my opinion, if you've got, say, 4 trades to burn and a full premium, trade him out for a Witts, a Darcy, or a Gawn. That'd be my most preferred options, I think. Big O. Damn, I feel sorry for George and Abs. The big fella's out due to health and safety protocols this week. Played a ripping game last week. Could have been even bigger than 115 if he kicked straight. That was a high score for the Lions as well. Had a decent first half, and then the third quarter, he just started on fire. Started with a lovely tap to Lions, followed up then with a nice goal from 50. The next contest follows up with a clearance, and then literally, I reckon it was 40 seconds later, almost gets another goal from the square, but was just run down. Did miss a pretty regulation set shot in a crucial period, which hurt, but all in all, a great game, and very sad, particularly as a Lions supporter, that he won't be available this week. And Lukey Jackson, only the 10 possessions for his 65 points. This has been, I'd say, a failed trade-in for Gawn if you purchased him a couple of weeks ago. Will be decent F7 R3 cover, but I wouldn't feel overly comfortable having him on the field each week. On to the forwards, 500k plus. At the top, we have Libba, highest scoring dog on the weekend with 103. Almost unheard of, and I'd say that would be close to the lowest high score for the Dogs this year in any round. I'd need to check that, but surely, it's got to be close. But back to about 23 touches, over half of those contested, 9 clearances, 5 tackles. It was a decent night, but we always want more. The next man, Connor Rozee. This man is in terrific form. 154 points against the Giants over the weekend. 24 touches, 3 free kicks, 4, and bagged 4 goals too. Super dangerous and a bit of a game changer. His lowest score in the last month is a 98, so his floor is raising. And best of all, he's regularly hitting that scoreboard. Comes up against the D's this week, which won't be easy, but such a talented player, a pod, and just looks red hot at the moment. I think that there are safer options, but certainly wouldn't begrudge you for trading him in because he is in really good form, as we just said. The Bond, average type game from him, as usual, pretty impactful when he got the ball, but only had the 19 touches, laid 9 tackles, which was nice, especially with some concerns over his shoulder. I'm still backing him in as our F1 from here, and he'll have to have a magical end to the year to keep the Dogs' slight finals chances alive. Cogs, 5 scores of 100 plus on the trot, super reliable lately, seems to be enjoying his footy, has a new lease on life under Spike, 32 touches last week against Port, but only went at 59%, which did hurt. Will Brodie continues to get no love from Champion Data, 29 touches, over 80% efficiency, 2 goals and 6 clearances, only netted him 88 points. The stat line seems like a 100 plus point score at the end of the day, but just wasn't to be this week. Luke Parker, great to see him hit some form after a poor game last week. 113 points, only 18 touches, but used the ball well. Led the Swannies for clearances and laid 7 tackles. Dunkley, very poor game from Dunk SuperCoach wise. Only on 3 points at quarter time, although he did pick things up. Only ended on a lowly 62 points for the game. Look, due to his high ownership, we all pretty much suffer here, but frustrating nonetheless. On a positive side of things, he did lead the Dogs for clearances and contested possessions. And Jeremy Cameron, we'll have to check this, but this may have been his first goalless game of the season. 15 touches, 6 marks, a tackle, 1 behind. That was his first failure in a fair while, but something you have to expect with a Cameron-type pick. On to the forwards, 250 to 500k, and the man up the top, Mr. Bolton, 2021's burn man. He's finally hit some form, had a monster first half. 15 touches, 6 clearances, and 3 goals, then added 14 more disposals after the half to end up on a whopping 162 points. Now, this may sound pretty obvious, but it could work out really bad or really well. It just depends how lucky you feel, but he could be a brilliant cover pick, given the fact that he's got a ceiling such as a 160 plus. Having him as that loop option wouldn't be the worst idea, but yeah, don't be expecting those scores each and every week. Dylan Moore, 29 touches and 7 tackles playing through the midfield last week. One of the best games of his career. Even got 4 free kicks just for good measure. 135 points for his efforts and a massive pod. At almost 500k, the value just probably isn't there for me. Some other names I'd prefer over a Moore, I think. Mitch Duncan, he's now really had 2 solid weeks. Absolutely dominated in red time in the 4th. So many junk time points. A little sickening, but to be fair, he had a consistent game from start to finish. And in my opinion, he deserved the score that he got. Playing off halfback, floating up the ground at times, gathered 32 touches, kicked a couple of goals, and had over 600 metres gained. It was a seagull type game. Only the 2 contested possessions, but a massive 28 out of those 32 touches were actually kicks, and he was pretty damaging. So I'll always have some concerns over his age and durability, but if he stays fit, he could be a solid pod to own. Rankin didn't play on the weekend, but he's had a really good breakout season. Hoskin Elliott only 85 points, but laid 8 tackles, which was impressive. Adam Treloar gathered 32 disposals on the night, which was the most by far for the Dogs. Played a lot of time down back in a bit of a different role, even took some kick-ins, and this was pretty unexpected for me. There was one occasion in the last where I remember he kicked the ball out in the full from inside the square. That would have hurt owners, but he did gain the most metres for the Dogs with 425, but that sums up how badly they performed as a group and how much they missed Dale's output. I'm not sure if this will be a permanent move, or I'm pretty sure that it won't. Is it more of an experiment? I'm not too sure. I'd be guessing it was because Dale was simply locked down and they needed someone else to provide that run, but it will be an interesting watch moving forward. Anderson, 2 massive scores for the year, one of those being a 135 last week, but apart from that, being pretty mediocre. I'd be passing personally, but who knows, could work out. Timmy Taranto, only the 23 touches, but 13 were contested, and he did lay 7 tackles, played mostly through the midfield with some forward rotations, and I don't mind him as a pick at this price. He's got high upside if you can avoid butchering the ball and maintain that midfield role rather than just pinch hitting. Great to see Zach Butters back. Almost got to the ton, but probably on my never again list now. The injury risk is just too real with Butters and his style of game, the way that he plays the game. Huge respect for him though. Love him as a player. Tomahawk, like Cameron, just didn't set the world alight. Did kick the 1 goal, but that was pretty much it. Surprising that Geelong convincingly beat Melbourne with 2 of their key forwards only combining for 1-3. The package was pretty subpar, 9 touches, 2 behinds, so 50-odd points. And Isaac Heaney decided to play a decent game this week, kicked 2 in the first half, and was on 63 at halftime, then snagged another couple to bag 4 for the night and end up on 112 points. Only 17 touches, but when you're impacting the scoreboard multiple times, you don't need leather poisoning. And as I say, Heaney is like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're going to get. And we'll finish off with the forwards under 250k. Up the top of the list, we've got Carmichael. Played his first game last week. Mid-forward option at 102k, so bargain basement price. Scored the 54 points from 14 possessions. Half of those were contested, but only went at around 40% effectiveness. Looked decent from the eye, rotating through the midfield. Pick him up if you want to. Nice and cheap. Jesse Motlop, not as lively as last week. Only the 1 behind, but still netted 60 points, which was handy. But Dendo didn't really have any impact at all. 9 touches at 33%. Probably isn't enough to keep his spot. Morris had 10 touches for the 35 points. Only half were effective though. Copped a knock to the back of his head. Was a bit sore, but toughed it out. Played on. Not sure if he holds his spot. And Morris, well, had a down game again. Pretty much had 1 effective disposal. Laid a few tackles. And Malcolm Roses, right down the bottom there. A break-even of 99 after a score, yes, this is correct, of -8 for the game. An absolute break-even killer. Dunahammy, yeah, won't be available this week. So that's it from me for now, guys. All the very best of luck with your trade-ins and your trade-outs, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Cheers, bye.